Okay, so welcome back to Backyard Mechanics. Today we are going to give our cylinder head a $50 backyard reco, and then we're going to reassemble this Clevo. Let's get into it. Alright, so update time for the Project F350 truck here. As you've seen, it's in a pretty sad and sorry state of affairs, so I could work on the engine and all the components inside the truck engine bay, move it around that, but these trucks have essentially a whole front just rips off, so it makes it very easy to work on. The truck's up very high, so it's tough then to get in. I just thought, with all the tools I've got, rip the engine out, actually inspect it a little bit. If we're going to put a bit of boost into it, we might as well see what we've got. Cleveland's come with closed chamber and open chamber heads. I didn't know what was on this engine, and it could make a big difference depending on what piston and rod combo and everything was in it already. So I'm glad I did take the engine apart, because what I found was it's 351 Cleveland with a bit of an old school setup. It's got ACL pistons with a 302 Cleveland rod, which with the closed chamber heads that were on it, which you see here's the closed chamber design, that works out to about 11:1 compression ratio. So as you can imagine, 11:1, put even 5 pound of boost into it, it's probably a bit of a recipe for disaster. That's a bit too high of a compression ratio for my liking to put any boost into an engine. So luckily, the heads here we have are also 2V, but they're open chambers. So you can see the difference of the chamber design. This bowl is significantly larger. I think these are around the mid 50 cc, and these are more like around the mid or low 70 cc. So what this means is I believe this will drop the compression ratio to somewhere around the mid 9s or even the low 9s, which when we only want to run, say, 5 pound of boost, it's not going to be some kind of ball terror. I just want a bit of boost to actually help with a bit of torque, bit of extra torque for the engine. This will be more than enough to drop it to the compression ratio where we need to do it. It's always going to run on probably 98 or something anyway, and it'll more than likely have a splash of E85 in it, because it's the fuel tech will run with flex fuel, so it'll easily be able to switch between the percentage of ethanol in the system automatically, so I won't have to do anything with having two different maps or anything like that. It'll just automatically compensate for whatever ethanol percentage is in the fuel. So when we go racing with the 626 end of day, chuck all the leftover fuel in the tank of this and drive it home, and yeah, we'll be fine. So got the engine apart now. This is probably the most dodgiest way you can machine a cylinder head at home. Lap the valves as well, but if you are in a pinch and you've only got $50 to get your car back on the road, then keep watching, because this is how you do it. Alright, now we need to make this stick properly. We have to wait for it to just tack off a bit, because if you just try and apply the wet straight to the wet, it won't really work that well. So just wait for this to get a bit tacky, and then we'll shark it in place. Okay, so we've got our cylinder head. We've got our 100 grit to start with, sandpaper. We've used a spray glue to glue it to our massive sheet of, this is Perspex. You can use glass, but this is thick, so it's not going to warp or bend, which is what you need. The next step is just to dump this here, and we'll use some forward and back motions, and pretty much the weight of the cylinder head is what will keep this sheet flat and keep this true all the way. So that's pretty much it. We're just going to do that over and over and over again until we get a surface that starts looking like this. So we can see here that quite a lot of the surface now is starting to look pretty much like a reflective mirror surface now. So you can slightly see some marks still from a gasket, so we'll just keep going a little bit more with this 100 grit until some of those marks we can't see, but I've run a fingernail over these and they're not picking up at all, which means they're pretty much non-existent anyway. What I'll do is I'll keep running with this just for now, and then we'll get the 240 grit on it just to mirror it up and run a straight edge over it. So if I look at these now, you can see that surface. It's got a great shine to it, and it's really smooth to touch too, so I'm pretty happy with that. This one over here is just as good. Next job is to lap the valves in these valve seats. So these are the valves that come out of these cylinder heads, and they've been numbered, so they should go back exactly where they are. But just to ensure that while we're doing this $50 reco, that they're still all good and ready to go for another 100,000 Ks plus, we'll just lap those seats and we'll show you how to do that next. So one of the last parts here of this El Cheapo backyard head refresh is lapping the valves. So the valves seat the back of this surface here in the head, and if those two surfaces have any imperfections, you're not going to get a perfect seal. So what we do is we have this easy to use little tool here. We have some paste, and quite simply all we do is there is two pastes. There is a coarse and a fine, so we'll go with the coarse one first. We just apply it like so. Make sure you don't get any of it on the stem, because it's going to go on the valve guide here. So we'll oil the guide. We'll drop the valve in. The valve just pushes in nicely as it should. If it doesn't push in nicely, you may have an issue with valve guide. May need machining, so it may be some work that you can't do on the cheap. Might have to get this out of the head place, but these ones all dropped in fine. Now we get this little tool. It's got two suction cups on there. I've put some oil on there just so it creates really good suction there, and then it's on there, and just like starting a fire in Scouts, we just rub like this. Always keeping downward pressure. You'll actually hear the tone of it change. And that should be enough for the coarse paste. So what we do now is we rub all the coarse paste off. So now we flip this over and we've got the fine paste here. And this will just finish the surface. So there are pastes out there that just say valve lapping paste, and it's just a one-part paste. I wouldn't recommend those. They won't finish the valve seat as well as this does. So this is two-part, coarse and fine. I would strongly recommend getting that if you can. So again, a little bit more oil on the valve stem. So you can see here's the difference between an unfinished valve seat and unfinished valve, and a finished valve seat and a finished valve. So obviously nice shine there to the surface to these two. You can see these ones still yet to be done. Right, so some more clean up here. Remove most of that intake gasket with a little gasket scraper tool to get the rest off. Nothing beats this. So we'll just liberally apply to the affected area. If gaskets persist after 10 minutes, see you, doctor. Look at how easy that peels off now. See you later. Right, so here is the slave cylinder, clutch slave cylinder, and you can see, wow, that's seen better days. It is finished. So, booyah! Pick this one up. Nice brand new one to go along with our brand new clutch as well. So we will whack that in now. So something pretty keen on doing here is getting this massive mess of parts off the bed of this and back in the engine bay. So cleaned out all the inlet manifold. Next is this rusty mess here. So these are the exhaust manifolds. So they're just a bit of surface rust here, which is pretty standard with cars. So what we'll do is I'll get my angle grinder and a wire wheel, and I'll just run over these, and then we'll paint them in some, probably just cast look paint. So give those a bit of a tidy up and do that now. Here's obviously exhaust manifold, so this is just some high heat whatever, cast iron. They're cast headers, so why not? Might give it 2 coats and that'll be basically enough, I think. So one of the most important parts about
EFI conversion and turbo conversion definitely, is ignition timing. When you just drop the distributor in and setting the timing, you need to know that the mark that's on the pulley is accurate, especially when you're going forced induction. Degrees of timing can be really important and vital to either having a sluggish engine or not enough power or way too much timing and blowing the engine up or blowing out a head gasket or something. So timing is critical, and setting it is ultra important. So I'll just see while the heads are off how I've gone about it. So with the heads on, you can still do this. There's definitely ways of doing it, but this is definitely a vital step. So let's see how I go about it now. Okay, so here's the engine with the heads off. Just sitting here, I've got a dial indicator there. It's going to be really hard to read the time, but this white mark here is 0. So I'm going to use that when I set the base timing. I'm going to use 0 as the lock point. I mean, there's other marks on there, but I've just marked 0 anyway, just so I can gauge what true actual top dead center is. And how I go about doing that is with the dial indicator, I can set to the top of the piston there, and essentially what I want to do is just lock this ratchet to the point where it moves and where it stops moving and then dwells. So what I've noticed is that around about at that 12 degree point, it dwells. So I know that sort of what that means is either side of that, a bit too far, it's very hard to do while you're holding a camera, is basically right here on that 10 is top dead center. So I know a bit over it, you'll see it sort of dwells and then comes back. You can see there it dwelled at about 12 and then comes back. So what I do is I take the center point of that dwell and knock it there, which is about that, back to 11. And you can see here the mark on a pulley and a factory timing marker is spot on 0. So that's super good news. Timing is spot on with the factory balancer. Next we can put the heads back on and everything and start reassembling it. Yeah, but now we know timing spot on. At least we know when we drop the distributor in and go set the timing with the timing lock on the Fuel Tech computer, we know that the numbers on the balancer on the pulley with the timing light, whatever the numbers are on the Fuel Tech is correct on this engine now. So happy days, and yeah, move on to the next step. Alright, so we've got the oil pan here. Now next step in our turbo conversion is ultra important, obviously. Our oil comes out of the turbocharger and it needs to drain back into the oil pan. So as you can see now, factory naturally aspirated V8 oil pan here. Nowhere for the turbo oil to drain back. Bam, that fixes that. So what we're going to do is drill a hole in here, weld this in. If you don't have a welder, don't fret, you can still get away with it. Drill a hole in here. You can actually get feed throughs like bulkheads and stuff that have Teflon washer on either side. You could use that in a pinch, or if you've actually got a large, like a sort of a thick cast aluminium sump, you could drill and tap it. If you use an MPT tap, it'll probably tighten up on the tap and seal probably okay anyway. Okay, with it's still smoking, end result is this. So weld in the pan, drain. 99.9% sure that is above the oil line as well, so it's not going to be fighting any of the oil in the sump, which is important as well, but that'll be fine. Always be careful when welding this if it's got oil in it, because obviously you've got flash of oil at a certain heat point. So if you've got a lot of oil around here sitting in the pan still, just be careful that if you're putting extreme amount of heat into here, that could flash and start a giant fire. So but another job done. So in order to remove this front cover, you have to remove the balancer. Part number, what's that, STHT25106-0. As you can see, I'm doing it with one hand here. Not a lot of effort required on this, so now it's all loose, and that should be almost good enough to come off there. Not much longer. And there we go. You can see how lucky we are with this engine too. I mean, look how clean it is underneath this timing cover. I don't know if people have pulled off a lot of old engine timing covers, a lot of engines before, but you see often oil staining and stuff here. But have a look at this. I'm getting a bit of light here, but Can we read that? It says Rollmaster, so very, very well known Australian company that makes really quality timing gear and double row as we spotted before. Right, so this is our 351 Cleveland engine. Surface here, cast iron and cast iron. You can have not a super, it doesn't have to be a super reflective shiny surface when you're using just a gasket like this, which is just a traditional sort of graphite or whatever type gasket. It's got the steel ring, embossing ring there, but these take up a fair bit of the imperfection that's actually in this surface. If you're using like a multi-layer steel gasket or something, yes, this has to be almost like super shiny mirror type shine, but the surface prep that we've done is fine here, and we're also going to add this as well, which helps the gasket just stick that extra little bit too. So yeah, with this, that, and the surface prep we've done, we should be all good, because we didn't have a blown head gasket to start with. We're just taking heads off and putting them back on, so we know that the surface was actually sealed okay to start with. Before we throw this on the engine block, we just let it get a bit tacky, either about 5 minutes or a little bit less, depending on temperature, etc. So yeah, once it's got a bit of tack to it, we'll just throw it on. But you do have to do this work within an hour or so. So once we put these on, put the cylinder head on, you have to torque it down within about 2 hours. So that's why we've got it set now. Clean all the block, clean all the surfaces, so we can chuck it on straight away and get that all done. One observation I made from playing with this engine lately is that fucking cast iron cylinder heads are heavy. These are the bolts, ARP, or head bolts, sorry, not studs, just bolts. I've lubricated the threads with the ARP moly grease it comes with, as well as the washer in the head as well, because that's a contact surface, so there can be friction. You know, there's friction at this head, this washer here, so you want to make sure that the torque rating you're getting back from your torque wrench is true, so you don't want friction there, which is what this lubricant gives you. Fear not, internet. This torque wrench actually has a finger tight option, so it's actually running these bolts down to, I believe it's something less than 20 Newton meters. So it's less than 20 Newton meters, so absolutely nothing when you consider that these heads will be torqued down to 135 Newton meters, or 100 foot-pounds. Alright, so I'm going to torque these heads down in 3 stages. And with pretty much everything, you start from the inside out. So the idea of that is, as it torques down, it spreads. Right, next step will be, let's crank it up to about 80 or 90 Newton meters. Never played with one of these before. Pretty basic. I made sure also I didn't, as you can see, I don't know if you see in the valley here, I didn't take the lifters out. So I took the other valve train up, I didn't take the lifters out. So every lifter has stayed with a corresponding cam lobe, which is really important too. So if you're doing something like this, a rattle can rebuild, don't take the lifters out, or unless you actually number them and that. But yeah, I've left them in there. So throw the push rods in there, rocker gear, and torque it all down, and away we go. Heads on, rocker gear on, intake manifold on. Right, so the paint booth is now ready, so should probably mask off these areas, maybe the exhaust ports and that, but yeah, no thanks. This will be fine. Boom. Actually looks more powder blue in this light for some reason, but it's a little bit dark in the powder blue. That's the first coat. You can definitely see there's a couple of areas where it's reacted. It must have a little bit of oil or something left on the surface, but I'll let this coat dry, and then I'll do a couple more coats, maybe a bit of clear, and done.
Bremy, when are you fitting the alternator to the V8?
That's my 471. That is it's covered in dirt and everything. That's yeah, here it is. Rattle can rebuild. So it was pretty messy and oily and dirty and gross, and quite honestly, when you've got the tools and the know-how, the easiest way to sort this out is just to yank the engine. It's right there. The truck's actually really difficult to work on because it is so high.
So in short, what's in this motor now that wasn't?
Yeah, so all we've done is change the cylinder heads pretty much. So we've changed obviously all the gaskets. So it's got a full Felpro gasket set in it. Whacked in some of the old copper gasket cement because we've done a real budget job on the cylinder heads to just get them up to spec. Full backyard mechanics style. And now they've got open chamber cylinder heads. So the open chamber heads hopefully give us somewhere in the low 9 to 1 comp. We're not going to be running mega boost, but that should be enough to give us get us out of the danger zone. And like we mentioned previously, I still don't know what we want to do with this thing long term. Is it Barra? Is it LS? Is it building this? Because if we build this, you know, we're probably going to look at better cylinder heads, a better
1,500 horsepower.
1,500 horsepower. He's smoking the tyres, hauling a car up the hill or whatever. But I mean, why not? I mean, there's no reason why we can't do something in this, because don't forget, this is actually going to be registered, unlike the rest of my cars. Is there any reason we couldn't put a lighter tray on the back of this thing made of aluminium, a short tray, and take this thing to drag challenge in the future?
Well, I think, you know, some of the comments, a lot of the people like the idea of us doing a turbo Cleveland.
Yeah, so I mean, the turbo, I was always keen on doing the Cleveland and turboing it. There's a couple of people, one standing behind the camera, that basically demanded that we do a Barra.
No, it's got to be an LS, bro.
Or an LS. Mate, when I was growing up, Clevelands were all a thing. You know, I was always, you know, if you're a Ford fan, a Holden fan, I've never really bought into that. If anything, I may have been a Ford fan. I really like the, you know, XY, XA, XB, XC Falcons, and, you know, the Cleveland was the ultimate back then, you know, sort of thing. So I'm pretty keen to do a pretty healthy Cleveland maybe at some point. So we'll look at it, and we'll look at costs and that, because again, this is just a dirty old tow truck. I don't want to be blowing the budget on you know, rotating assemblies and cylinder heads and whatnot for this thing.
Yeah,
so
things can snowball though.
Yeah, true. It is. I'd rather it snowball on a race car that goes fast, because that's what I'm passionate about, than this thing that's just hauling the race car around. But yeah, this is all done now to the level I need to do it. We'll throw it back in the car and keep on cleaning up the truck now. Sorry, and I've got to make something on the front of this. So the front of this normally would have a big
far out
sandwich plate down. So this is where the water pump will normally bolt. You can see almost the pattern of where there's some surface rust that's pitted the area there. But I've got to make a plate now here to fit our Davies Craig electric water pump will fit. And what we'll do is we'll whack this back in. I'll make that plate to fit that, and then I'll make up some new radiator hoses to join up to our Mishimoto radiator. And I'll probably fit the Fuel Tech ECU now. And I'll have it running the ignition setup, have it running wheel speed sensor, so something on the dash with the speedo actually works, so I can get this car roadworthy. And I'll probably still run it on gas for the time being, because I think engineering to get it on the road, to get it registered and roadworthy, if I was just to go fuel injection, I'd need it engineered from day dot, and I'd rather just get this thing on the road straight away. So I'll put the LPG on it just temporarily to get rego, and then I'll flick it over to the EFI and turbo in one hit. So that's pretty much it. We've got to get this back in there now. I've had enough of painting, as you can see, as runs and crap galore, because I can't even use a spray can, let alone a paintbrush. But I'm not a painter, that's for sure. But I mean, some people probably say I'm not a fabricator or anything else either anyway. So we'll get this in there, we'll get it going, and we'll get it on the road so we can get out to the racetrack ASAP, because the poor thing on the hoist over there is feeling pretty neglected, and I'm missing the racetrack. So till next time, we'll catch you later. So that's it for this episode of Backyard Mechanics. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing if you're not a subscriber already. Also share this video on all your social media platforms. It would help us a lot, so thank you. Next week, it's time to put that engine back where it belongs and start tackling some of that troublesome wiring. So I can't wait. We'll see all that on another episode of Backyard Mechanics.
And like always, support the people who support us.